Today we have a super exciting guest coming all the way from the heart of New York City, Miss Nicole Januarie. Nicole, thank you so much for being on the podcast.
What's up? What's up, JV Studios? I'm super happy to be here, man.
Yeah, it's been quite some time. I know in 2018 we teamed up on a project with Essence and Alta Beauty with you, and since then we've just been following your works. You know, the amazing stuff you've been a part of and directed, and super stoked to kind of let everyone who's listening learn a little bit more about what you do. So if you don't mind, I'd love to just hear your background and what exactly it is you do.
Whew, well, it doesn't sound like it, but that's a pretty loaded question.
Love it.
But I am Nicole Januarie. My current production company is January 1st, where we focus on creating content. We create, ideate from soups to nuts. So we start at the process where we kind of come in and talk to a client about what their initiatives are for the coming year, quarter, or whatever they're trying to accomplish. And then we'll sit with them and ideate and see what kind of concepts and creative initiatives kind of work and mesh well with what they're trying to accomplish. From that part, we're not unlike other productions where it's, you get the concept and then run and execute. We're able to take what we've ideated with the client in partnership and take it and actually execute it. And another little tidbit about that is myself as a director can actually take that idea that I pitched to the client and actually be the person to bring it to fruition on set. Case in point, when we worked together, I worked alongside you as your director. And so having that kind of journey with the client allows us to really have a voice from beginning to end. I'm also pretty knee deep in post-production when it comes to things like that. So in a nutshell, that is what I do. I'm executive producer, director for commercials, branded content, series, TV shows that we recently got into, which we'll talk more about. But yeah, that is kind of like what I do and who I am. I hope that kind of answers your loaded question in a short form way.
I think you said it super concise, and what I really took away from that is that, I mean, you're pretty involved in these productions, and I think like you said, it kind of separates from the traditional is that you are involved in those first conversations with the client that really you can really inspire how the final product or just how the shoot overall goes versus just here's the treatment, here's what we're thinking, kind of plug and play, make it happen, right? Where
100%. 100%. I think that's always an interesting partnership because it really depends where you come into, into conversations with a client when they have an idea. And sometimes it is that, right? Like they come to you with a treatment and they say, this is what we want to do. Can you do it? I think one of the lessons that I've learned over the years, sometimes you shouldn't just take that package and execute it because they don't necessarily always know what they want. And so to be that person and partner to actually be like, you know what, let me make it make sense for you, and it's like, it might be a great idea and it makes sense on paper, but we as, being in the video industry, we understand that like not everything translates all the time. And so it's our responsibility to be that voice and that, that kind of advocate to push through the margins and seeing what they really trying to say versus what they're saying and helping kind of like sculpt and mold that concept and idea.
Yeah, I love that. I think it happens even with us now is like, we're getting to that point where there is still influence, but I also feel like there are times where they think they know what they want, right? And then maybe they see the first edit, and then all of a sudden now they know what they want, and it's like we should have had these conversations. And it, normally it goes well, but it's like it's kind of what it could have been. But I'm really interested is I know a lot of your work. You've done stuff with Amazon, Food Network, Alta Beauty, Clorox. I mean, a lot of commercial brands. How did you like find your style of directing?
Oh, interesting question. I have this concept or this idea, I think, that whatever project I work on, the style kind of unfolds. When you look at my work, you'll realize that unlike other directors, not all of my work don't necessarily have the same voice. It's the same baseline, right? Like quality, great, conversational, really narrative, like unfolding concepts, especially when it comes to Black women and people of color. Like that's our niche, right? Like how do we tell quality, high, uh, really authentic stories from that voice and that perspective? That is where my directing style hinges on. And when you really pay attention to making those stories unfold, you can't come in there with an overarching perspective. You have to allow the story to unfold and the individuals that you're working with to be able to tell their story in the way and light that they like, or who they really are. Because like before we started this, you mentioned being, you came out deciding that you needed to be something, you needed to be this host, you needed to kind of present as something that you think is successful, when in reality, the most successful thing you could be is yourself. And so allowing my talent, the people that are in front of my camera, to really be themselves and unfold, that makes, I have to be malleable to allow that to unfold, and not being like, this is how I direct and this is what I want to see. And this, there is that sense of partnership where I'm communicating because I have the overarching idea and concept, and I see it all and I know how the vision can come to pass, but I'm allowing them to fill that picture and flowing with it. You being on set with me have, we worked on a pretty intense project together. It was a 6-episode campaign for Ulta Beauty, and working with those 6 girls, developing that storyline throughout, following their journey, because they're not actors, right? They're non-actors coming to being tossed into a kind of like been given tasks, and like this whole overarching creative concept that they have to be a part of and like be, step up to the plate with. It can be overwhelming. And here you have 20 people staring at you, waiting for you to, divulge like everything that's going on in your brain. And you're like, I don't know. I'm freezing. And so if I told them like, this is exactly how I want you to stand, and this is how you come across, and this is what it's going to look like, I think it would have been a tall order and a very unfair ask. Right. And so to stand there and say like, okay, be yourself, let me help fold the picture around you to really get your authentic story and get the overarching campaign heartbeat, that is what I would say is probably my style when it comes to directing. I love working in partnership and looking at the story itself and allowing that to speak to me, versus the other way around.
Right. I mean, your answer, like, and working with you, it seems like you're really just an authentic person outside of the world of, directing. So you understand your talent and people on set as just who they are, and not what everyone wants them to be. And I feel like even on that shoot with us, they were not actors. So it's like there is that learning curve for them to try to be themselves, but also they're not used to that. So I think where someone like yourself comes in handy is really making people feel comfortable. And can you kind of talk about like working with how you've experienced working with like non-actors and real actors, and maybe the differences and maybe what you prefer?
Interesting. There's actually a lot more similarities than there are differences in the approach to acting and being a non-actor and performing on screen. But my style of it is also pretty similar. Like, let me think about this. Let me see how I can put this in words.
Yeah.
When you're working with a non-actor, you have to ask them to envision themselves in a scenario or take them to the moment that authentically speaks to what they're sharing, right? And so my questioning and my positioning for making them relay something to me is always going to be prefaced with making sure that they're talking to me and putting their own emotions in that moment. There's a lot more reminding happening, and there's a lot more making sure that they don't focus on anything else but me. And so to your point, I remember one of my APs that I had years ago. She reached out recently, and she was like, "Oh, I learned so much from you. I've been able to incorporate it a lot with my current work." And I was just curious. I was like, "What exactly was that?" Especially when it comes to non-actors. And she's like, a lot of times when you do these long interviews or you try to work with a non-actor, it's very easy to zone out because you're looking for feedback. As an individual, if you and I are having a conversation, you're looking for like facial expressions and cues, verbal or audible cues of like your interests, and like figuring out how to pivot when you were relating your story. When you're on set, nobody's giving you any feedback because you have to be silent, and I have to not influence what you're telling me because I'm listening. I do the opposite. I'm overly animated because I have to give you what you're seeing. So behind camera, if we're having an interview, like I'll be like, I will pretty much be doing my kind of what do you call that? Where you're like the actively comedic in the background, so that they can kind of feed off of that and laugh and be like, oh my God, I feel like I'm talking to a mime, for lack of a better term of describing myself. Because I'm like, and you interact and making sure that they have those verbal cues to feel comfortable and keeping to share, and then be like, oh my God, and then this happened. I'm like, really? Like, you know what I mean? Because I can't talk. Then there is a sense of flow that starts to happen, right? That can't have, a lot of people forget that that's that. And so they'll stay with their paper and like, okay, and next question, and then wait for them to answer. And then next, and it's like, okay, can you say that with a lot more joy? Okay. You know what I mean? And so, and it's very difficult to be able to tap into your authentic self when somebody is not there to receive it on the other end, right? And so that's what I try to do with non-actors. With actors, as you know, there are the two acting styles, right? And when you're an actor, you still have to do the same thing. You're just trained in it. You still have to take yourself to, what is it called, the Slanovsky technique, where you have to take yourself into the place or emotion and ground yourself in it in order to relay a character's expression or emotional status, right? So it's exactly the same thing. It's just they are not trained in it. So I don't have to remind an actor to do that. But what I can do is give them what I found the differences are. I have to give them, sometimes they might not have experienced that specific instance where a non-actor can go back to the exact moment that they were relaying. An actor might not necessarily have that exact moment to refer to. So what you do is you have to think fast. What I've noticed myself doing is I have a very vivid imagination sometimes. And so my correlation to things can be really weird. And so for instance, if we have to talk about something like you're experiencing, I don't know, you're drowning or something like that, right? Like how do you express drowning without like being dumb or not having an authentic expression when you come back out of the bathtub or whatever, I'm just envisioning this very dramatic scene where you're like trying to drown yourself in your bathtub. Dark, I know, but stay with me. Well, how do you come out and really find yourself like showing me that initial reaction of what you were thinking of just doing and then being in that moment, right? And so now you have to find a moment in time where you probably lost somebody that you loved the most in your life, right? And in an instant, you thought they were gone, and then they're there, or something like that. Take yourself in that position, put yourself in the body of the person that you've loved the most in the world, and now view yourself through that lens, right? Which is difficult to do because we don't see ourselves like that every day, unless we're reminded that you should be that person that you love the most in the world, right? So now you have this individual, and you're allowing yourself to transport yourself and viewing what you just did. And so that initial reaction of seeing yourself, right, it puts you there. Yes. So I think as a director, at least for me, my whole entire collaboration or partnership with the actor is to provide scenarios and instances that they can open their imagination and have a kind of like a transporting, vessel. Because it's difficult to come up with that when you remembering your lines and you're trying to do all these things at the same time, and you're wondering, do I look attractive right now? Like, it's my job to provide vivid, descriptions and scenarios. And sometimes I have to pull you aside and say, like, let's spitball, like let's da, 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 da. And so it is very interesting. And I think the times where I haven't worked with a lot of actors, but the times that I do work with actors, that has been my experience. It's been pretty similar. It's just one is trained, the other is not trained. Right. And sometimes the vessel of transportation is completely different. Yeah, no,
I mean, that was an amazing answer, by the way. I think really, like, hearing what you said, it's like you like to paint a picture, Yeah. And I think, versus just reading off a prompt, say you need to smile more. You need to smile more. It's like, how can you make them laugh? Right? How can you bring them to a spot where they feel happy because they need to be happy? And I think that's something unique about you. I feel like when we even worked with you, I mean, we were laughing all day on set. I mean, that shoot was high energy. It was exciting. They won a contest. So like that energy had to bounce back. Right. And so I feel like you did a great job just keeping the morale of the whole team just high. It's like there's no room to be unsure and to kind of question stuff. And I love that. And so where I want to kind of take this is, so that's more people on camera. I'd love to hear, as a director, when you get, project came in, it got approved by the client, it's time to find the crew. How do you go about finding the right production team for the project? What do you look for?
That's a really interesting, not just question, but pain point, I think, across the board for a lot of people that have to crew up, right? Because it's not just how great you are, right? Like how you said, it's how well you work with others. It's your chemistry that you have with people. It's your eye or not your, there are so many different factors that come into play. So when you are put in a position where I have to find a DP, like I have several DPs that I feel like I call them my work husbands, and, and it works out, right? Like I've become so comfortable to be able to be like, all right, you understand, what the vision is. We have a similar eye. You're very technical. You're this, et cetera, et cetera. Even with our experience, which is a great example to utilize, it was our first collaboration, right? And so we had to figure out our dance, right? Like we had to figure out, like, how do we communicate? But we clicked off the bat, right? Like we went through our walkthrough. We had a couple of conversations. You understood where I wanted to go with things. And from that point of end, I have to trust you and what you're able to bring across as a DP producer, And so I think for myself, when I look for talent right now, it's a lot of word of mouth. It's a lot of sharing resources, asking people you trust. I think because if you have chemistry with one person and they, confirm another chemistry, person with chemistry, it's easier to pass that threshold. At the same time, I believe, even though I have not been as much of a user of Instagram when it comes to my work, I'm trying to do better. It is a really good resource to find new talent, to see who's doing. I think it's great what individuals have been doing lately, which is posting their whole crew members. I've been utilizing that. I think especially when it comes to certain things, like all of us do, like, oh, we need a post producer. We need, who colored that? That's, who did X, Y, and Z, who was the DP on that? Was that the producer? Great. Let me go to their website. And so I feel championing each other in this industry is very important. Having making sure that you're always, your work is represented in a way that speaks to what you want to do more of. I've seen a lot of people being like, this is what I've done, but I want to do X, Y, and Z. I've been at fault of that, which is, we all want to do certain things that we've not been able to been awarded to do yet, but we have the capacity to do it. Right. Then share in what ways, you can tap into that and expand that, and where and what could kind of be used as a parallel to where you could go. Right. So say all that to say, lists have been a huge resource and I can share a couple that I've been able to tap into.
Yeah.
There's been apps like Creatively, Working Not Working, who recently sold to Fiverr, which is
Gotcha.
an interesting partnership. But there's a lot of groups on Facebook that are also really, like that's a great resource as well. I've recently, like, even with those groups, reach out to the owners or people that started the groups and ask if they have a database. And so
Nice.
a lot of times when these posts go out, there's a tallying that happens on the back end, and you don't have to keep asking or posting when you have when you down on your luck and need somebody by tomorrow, you
Right.
have a database. And so it's also been, beneficial to, over the years, build that database myself, and sometimes you have to highlight red and be like, I can't work with this person again, I can't.
Right.
And so you have to keep your database up to date as well. But long answer to your question,
Yeah.
I guess, but through multiple different ways. When I find a good relationship, I like to keep it and grow it and see where we can eventually collaborate further on. And I also love, trying to find new relationships and trying to see how, we can all be great.
Yeah.
So.
No, it really, like, what I took away from that is that, you know, it's experience, and obviously having, knowing how to do the work is huge. But again, like, back to your thing, is like, it's working with people you work with, building synergy with people. Like with JV, we definitely have like a core team, and then there's definitely moments where we bring on new people and try new people out. But for the most part, we kind of keep a tight crew, because you build that synergy where, like you said, you have that eye. There's a lot less kind of like this, and you kind of just are on the same page. But at the same time, I do think it's important to constantly try to keep a fresh database and try out new people, because people specialize in different things. And I think we're at a spot where, we've been kind of taking, I think we've been doing a lot more commercial stuff, which is something we've really been wanting to get into, but it kind of comes with a different standard and different styles of shooting. And so it's kind of like relearning it. And sometimes bringing on new people, it kind of brings out a new element in yourself. So I love that. I love that. I think, I want to kind of piggyback down. Like, I want to go to Nicole's early years, right? A lot of your work on your website, it's very lifestyle driven. It's commercial. It's super polished. It just looks like a breath of fresh air. Can you talk about like some of the projects, or just how when you were younger, like how you got, like what were some of the stuff, things you did to get into the commercial? Were you creating specs as a director? Were you filming stuff? Were you taking stuff off Craigslist?
Taking stuff off Craigslist, definitely. Um, so it's kind of like an interesting mosh posh of things, to your point of the list that you just ran through. But when I was in college, I was running around with a camera all the time, and I was able to convince some of my journalists, because I had a minor in journalism, and I go figure, I hated writing. And I was able to convince them that I wanted that the industry was going to more of a digital platform. And, everything at the time this was like early, I'm giving away my age on that. But this was like in the beginning where a lot of journalism and like newspapers, like the scare of newspapers being starting to be archaic, and that everything's going to move to a digital realm, and that everybody's going to have to know how to use a video camera, et cetera, et cetera. So they allowed me to certain things. I don't know how I got it right, but I was able to present some of my stuff in a form of interviews, and cut together pieces. And instead of writing a piece, I had great interviews. And so, because I'm really strong with creating questions and doing interviews, that's like where the journalist love of mine came into play, not necessarily sitting there and writing and dictating to you whatever was said. And so I was able to translate in that realm. And I remember it was a linguistic thesis that I had to hand in, and it was like, I forgot what I was doing, or what the topic was, but I remember it was probably, I thought I was going into docs, and I did it beautifully. At the time, for some reason, I was like living my best life in New York, and I was young. I was going out a lot. So I was meeting a lot of people, and my doc was filled with semi celebrities and high tiered like executives that I was able to kind of like ask friends of friends to kind of interview based on this thesis that I had. And everybody was great and kind of like gave me the light of day. And the teacher was so impressed that she wanted to hang on to the end piece to kind of like show future people coming in, this is what this project can be, and this is how you really dive into the linguistical attributes of the subject, blah, blah. And that series of interviews led me to meet an individual that was really inspired by the way that I interviewed them and the way that everything came together, that they like, hey, do you want to, like, I have a project that I'm trying to get off the ground. Do you want to just come meet with me and we can talk and have X, Y, and Z? And I was super excited and I went. And at the time, it was the manager of this band that started, like this indie band. Nice. And he played the music. It ended up when he played and I heard the voice, I was like, is this person? And I was like, I realized we were friends like years ago and like I knew them. And so I was like, heck yeah, I'm on board. And I ended up creating music videos and content for this band for like over the span of a year or two. And it's like you can still dig on YouTube and find it. Sometimes I'm still a little impressed that I did all of that by myself with one camera, but I was super excited and just eager to be able to tell these stories. And for me, I love music and I love videos, and being able to tell the story of what the artist was thinking about through visual imagery was great. It was a great opportunity. I was by myself with one camera, right? However, that afforded me an informational and a network. And so that being able to showcase to them, like, this is what I've been able to work on. They like, by yourself? I'm like, yeah, this is what I did, blah, blah, with no, that I didn't have like a PA or a gym or a AD or, like I was like, it was just me shooting all these things. And I remember my favorite piece was I was going to Miami with a couple of friends, and I had my camera out from the time I got on the airport till the time we left. The last day on the trip, I told them, hey guys, I was shooting a music video. Nobody knew. And so the entire time I was creating scenarios or like following certain moments, you would think that like they were a part of this like acting process. And the only time that they were acting was like, I was asking my friend and her boyfriend to pretend like, I was like, when I told them got so excited, I got a toy gun, they had to shoot, he had to shoot her at the end. Dark, but like that was the only piece that I was like, and this was like a cover of If Six Were Nine by Jimi Hendrix that they did, and at the end they had to like shoot, he had to shoot him, so they were part of that piece, and I had the blood splatter all over the screen at the end. So like those exciting little like experimental pieces that I did, and just because I was so for the love of the art, actually afforded me an informational that got me my first gig at a network. It was at MTV at the time. And that spiraled into going from one project at MTV to another, to BET, being, tossed around in the Viacom realm. That transpired me getting working on my first couple of commercials, because they saw, that I was driven and was just trying to learn everything. I was first one in, last one out, always. And I was able, that's why I'm like, which is a story for another time, but we have to put in our work. Like a lot of people be like, they ask me to do so many different things and I'm tired. I'm like, yeah, that's, that's production, but we'll talk about my perspective on that.
Yeah.
However, went in and I was able to get into Essence Festival at the time as a coordinating producer. I would then work my way up after 4 or 5 years to be the head of production at Essence. So Essence Festival. So I was running not just the head of production, but the head of video. So ideating and shooting and creating content for pre-production, during, and post content for the festival, which is, I don't know if you're familiar with Essence Festival, but it's like the biggest festival in the United States, 400,000 people throughout the, the 3-day period. And so that was kind of what propelled me, because it was like, I was able to really beef up just the way that the content that I was able to create and how to tell stories by sticking to an initiative and still being able to monetize or helping a client monetize. And that kind of helped me get in front of partnerships. Like a lot of brands have partnerships with media companies, and so that was kind of like how I did my first, branded content series. I think that was also at the beginning of branded content. Branded content is not as old as we think it is. Like a lot of times, like commercials was commercials, and it became big when in the when we started creating content that people tried it. They liked the fact that commercials were, the product was hidden within the message, right? Not the message hidden in the product. That was a time where I started falling in love. I was like, oh, I like this. I actually like the way this moves. I like the conversation around, natural integration of a brand. And I pivoted into that. I started doing a lot more of that. Case in point, what you see on my website today. Yeah. And so here I am at another, crux in my career where I've pivoted more into series and TV shows, and I'm super excited about that next chapter. I can't really relay what we've been working on, but we've been working hard. I didn't imagine it would be this much, but I'm like, and starting out full circle of how much I didn't like writing. I am writing the most that I've ever written in my life, so it's quite interesting.
It's cool to see the roots kind of tie back in, and I think you have to get thrown into it when you're young and you're looking to get into something. I mean, for me, I started making YouTube videos in high school when I was 14, and I was like, wow. I was getting made fun of, or everyone's like, I love your videos, right? And it's just like to be able to reflect and see where it started. I had friends from high school that are like, you're still making videos now, but like a whole different way. And it's like, it's consistency, but it's putting that time in, it's learning. It's like, it's wearing a lot of hats, and it's putting in that work, and it's not going to come easy. And I just think, I think you should be proud just to see like it started. I mean, I actually worked at a newspaper in my college too. I made a documentary my senior year, and to see that, to be able to look back and see probably so much you would have done differently. But the power of, I had another episode with someone where we talked all about like how the 7D and the 5D Mark II was like the camera. It was like the only camera I did like 60 frames.
I still have the 7D. I still have that 7D.
60 frames at 720, like you were in, like you were doing it right. But like at that time, that's all we were doing. It was just DSLR, just point and shoot, and just like not thinking about anything, just creating. And to see the evolution of how some people grow and stick with it and really find their purpose, I think it's beautiful. And I think, you're just getting started in your career. I feel like you're about to do some cool stuff.
I'm tired already. I know, but thank you.
I love to hear that. And I guess to kind of go along like the whole directing theme that I want to stay on is you're on set with the client. Everything's going good in pre-production. You have everything, the vision's there, right? You get on set. Mm-hmm. You get pulled off to the side. The client's like, hey, can we change X, Y, and Z? How have you have you had those situations? And B, how do you handle just keeping that composure and staying professional and obviously, making sure the client feels honored?
Of course it's happened. Come on.
I know. Like, if it didn't, right?
Right? I don't know anybody. Like I'm curious if when you ask that question to somebody and they come back and say, no, it's never happened, everything is like completely ever gone according to plan, like please introduce me to them because I need them.
I will. I'll think about it.
But yes, definitely. There's definitely been even moments. I remember this one time we were shooting a campaign, a multi-video campaign, and the client was on set, and they, it was a pretty big team of, clients. This was before COVID where nobody could be on set. And so everybody was there, and everybody, wanted to be super involved in like how everything pivots. And there was a lot of things, I think, that the people that, you met first time on set weren't a part of the conversations or didn't relay certain things ahead of time. And so whatever, the conversations that were approved, all of a sudden there were things that they thought was not there. So the day started pretty tough. like, I think because, you were confronted with like, so where is that? Where's this? Like for me, that's not a stressful situation. That's just like, okay, you have the brand's best interest at heart, and so do I.
Right.
Please let me know how I can be successful. And so I incorporated, I took in whatever they were saying, and I had to pivot real fast and figure
Right.
out like how to change certain lines, or try to, seed the talent to kind of like have different talking points, and then figure out how to change framing. There's
Right.
many times that you thought something would work ahead of time that doesn't, and you cannot be in this industry not ready to pivot, not ready to be okay to understand that things aren't going to go exactly how you've envisioned it, because then I feel you break things more than you ever be able to fix it or even grow.
Right.
I've learned to not to disconnect as
Right.
hard as that is, because this is a lot of discouragement that definitely comes with that, when you know what will be great and you know how to do it, and somebody doubts you or thinks that their way would be better. And
Right.
when you do give in and then they question, like, oh, this is actually, yeah, now it looks like it's you, and it's like, but
Right.
that was your idea. You have to
Right.
like stand back and say like, okay, so let's figure out how this could be more of what you were looking for. I think composure and being a partner to people, it is your biggest, it's 80% of your job. And
Right.
so as a director that works with clients, and I know a lot of directors, and it's probably different because I tend to be producer a lot of times as well.
Yeah.
So a lot of directors could be shielded from that conversation, and they could be adamant and wanting to see what they want to see. I don't have that luxury. I
Right.
have to be there for my client and make sure that we're partners and getting the best product across. So I don't see my clients as the client. I see them as my partner when we go into these realms. And the best clients are those that are closely connected to you during the
Right.
process, and not wagging their fingers, but like really trying to understand, like, this is who I'm. It's almost like a marriage, right? Like, you
Right.
don't go into the battlefield looking at your spouse like, we need to change this, and what are you gonna do about it?
Yeah.
Like, you go in and say like, I want you to win, I want this to be the best undertaking. How can we kind of partner on our strengths, because I know this, that. We figure it out.
Yeah.
um I do believe that those conversations are best definitely had weeks prior to being on set.
Right.
It definitely happens when you are on set.
Yeah.
And you either have to be very confident in denying or declining their advice, and knowing exactly that what you've planned to do is still meeting that initiative, or
Right.
you have to take into what they have to play. And there's definitely been times when I had to just be a little stern to it with a client in a very nice way of being like, no, I got this, I
Right.
know
Yeah.
exactly where it's going to go. And like, I'll tell you, probably 90% of the time, they'll come out and dab me. We're like, Shelby, like, you were right. You were, I'm like, bet,
That's
and
right.
so it's also just that confidence that you need to build in yourself and your client, and your client has to build in you,
Right.
to know that, don't just like, give me a second, like, don't just
I
need
love that.
have the need to change everything. Like, we're still going to where we said we were going to go,
Right. Right. No, I sit with that completely. I mean, it's happened to us recently on some shoots, and I think it's, again, like you said, it's always for the best intentions for the brand and for the project. But you have to know your boundaries. Is like, you are being hired to do this. You do this for a living. It's the trust, but it's also, it's not letting them, it's almost like questioning it as well, and not just being super submissive, like, oh, totally. And then next thing you know, because at the end of the day, when they see the final product, maybe isn't what it, they're not going to remember the moment on set. They're going to remember the Vimeo player watching the video saying, "Why, I thought we were supposed to do it like this." So no, I love that kind of having that healthy boundary of being able to just be vocal with your client, but also you're on the same team. And John and I were always like that. When we're on set, we're all a team. We're all have the same goal in mind. So I really sit with your answer, and I love that. As we kind of start to wrap it up, I always like to ask, young directors, young Nicole's, trying to do you. If you had a piece of advice for someone looking to get into directing, I'd love to hear that. Something you've taken away.
I think a lot of people probably have done this faster than I was able to do. And what I would have told my younger self or another younger Nicole is like, don't hide behind what you think it should look like to be a director, or what you think like the work that you need to do, because what you do is not going to look like everybody else's, and it's not supposed to. And you slowly but surely have to have confidence in your niche. There's different ways where I needed to find and see where the height of my strengths lay, and it's going to look completely different from another director. And it's definitely a journey. I think everybody right now that's new director, and I've seen it so much, everybody's work is visually like gorgeous, right? Like the appeal is there, but there is so much. That's like the tip of the iceberg. There's so much down here too. And I think a lot, like what I've actually seen, which is interesting because I've worked with directors as well, as like creative director or EP on projects. And I've seen that there's a lot of steps that are being skipped, to rush for this visual like payoff.
Right.
And I would encourage young people to walk with intention to discover their voice so that they can support it when that fad is out of touch, or where you not just another picture in a deck. You come with a lot more, to offer when it comes to bringing your vision to pass, and how you be able to construct it, and also like understand, what your underlying vision is for your career as a director, right? Like, where are you doing this on your way to something? Are you doing this to build to this piece, or are you just doing it because it's cool right now? So I think it's not as deep, but it's very,
I think it's deep, girl. I love it. I think everything you've been saying has been beyond kind of what, like for me, I love bringing people on that just speak freely. I mean, you're just an open book. You're willing to share, but you have the experience to reflect on that has got you to where you are. I really appreciate you being on the podcast.
Absolutely, it was such a pleasure.
Yeah, and reconnecting. I've been usually ending all the episodes of just, how can people reach you if they maybe want to get connected with you or see some of your work?
Yeah, so my Instagram is my first and last name, which is NicoleJanuarie. January like the month, but with the IE instead of a Y. Our company IG is January 1st, once again with an IE instead of a Y and one ST. And then our website is www.january1st.com. That's, and you can obviously, like, our email is on the website and every kind of way that you can get in touch with us. So please reach out. Don't hesitate.